All right, folks. It looks like we're ready to get started. Hello and welcome to RVC's house cooling party. This will be our first virtual thought leadership event, and we're so grateful to everyone here today for joining us on this adventure. My name is Desiree. I'm a staff member here at RVC, and I will be your host for today. I'm joined by all four of our magnificent co-EDs who will be chatting with us in just a moment about their shared leadership journey together. But before we dive in, a few quick housekeeping items. I want to direct attention towards our accessibility notes, which we should be sharing on a slide in just a moment. We have English cart services available as well as Spanish translation, Spanish interpretation. To access the English cart services, you can click the show captions icon in the meeting controls toolbar below on your screen. And for Spanish interpretation, you can click the interpretation icon in the meeting controls toolbar below and then select Spanish. We also have a wonderful tech support team here today who is ready to assist you. The RVC tech support team will be denoted in the chat by a moving box emoji. If you have any tech needs or questions, you can direct message our RVC tech support team. And speaking of the chat, please feel free to utilize the chat during our time here together today. We welcome comments, emojis, questions. RVC chats are known to get quite lively, and they really help us get a sense of where people are at with us today. So before we dive into our conversation, we'd also like to get a sense of who is in the room with us. We're going to take a look at the poll results in just a moment. How many people do we have here in the room with us? What's our total? We have 56 total people so far. And of those people joining us, 0 said that they're not sure what this is. 17 said, I know what it means, but I would like to learn more. Yeah. 4 said, I'm in research/learning mode. 9 said, I've done research and I'm interested in proposing in my workplace. 17 said, we are just starting to explore this in our workplace. And 52 said, we are in it and curious about how others are tackling the challenge. Wow, we got a good community with us here today. So before we get into our conversation about shared leadership, I want to actually hand it to Jojo now, one of our 4 co-EDs we'll get to know a little bit more later for our land acknowledgement.
Peace, everyone. We want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, the first people of Seattle, specifically the Duwamish people, past and present. A people still here continue to bring light to their ancestral ancient heritage. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. We also pay homage and respect to the Black and Brown communities of Seattle who have created generational and cultural legacies for us to follow and to continue to build power for future folks of color and other folks in the margin.
Thank you, Jojo. So I think now we are going to get into some introductions. We want to get to know all of our co-EDs here with us today. So let's start with Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Chris Rhodes, PM. I am one of the 4 co-EDs responsible for fundraising, communications, and PR. Been with the organization in a little over 5 years.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be in community with you. My name is Umber Mahar, and I use she, her pronouns. I've been with RVC just about 4 years. And with my co-ED hat, I am, the finance lead and the lead for internal organizational development and cross-organizational coordination.
Hi, my name is Roshni Sampath. I use she, her pronouns. I have been here exactly as long as Unber, down to riding the elevator together on our first day.
True fact.
And I split my role between being a co-ED and a capacity building lead at RBC. And in my co-ED role, I do a lot of our thought leadership and sort of wider work, as well as liaison with the board and do some internal like strategic planning for RBC.
What's up, y'all? I'm JoJo from Got Home, one of the co-EDs, one of four. Him pronouns, started at RBC about 4.5 years ago. Started out as an operational support program director and has since moved on to the co-ED-ship with these folks.
What do you do that?
What do you lead on as a co-ED?
The stuff they don't like. How's that?
Things I like.
I'm the fixer.
So he does a lot of legal and liability work, and he helps with fundraising, and community advocacy and engagement.
There are a lot of roles and responsibilities that I think that are distributed amongst the four of us. And I think some of the stuff that I've got are the things that they don't want. So
Could say that the same for finance.
it is true.
We'll get to that.
We'll get there, y'all.
All right, well, thank you. Before we launch into the Q&A section, for folks that maybe have not been following our journey with shared leadership or in general, or just learning about RBC for the first time, would y'all mind giving everyone an overview and a brief update about what's been going on at RBC?
Yeah, I can take that question. So I think hopefully the one thing that's obvious is that we're moving. That's why it's called a event. We are leaving our home here in International District that we've been here for a little over 5 years, and we're moving back to our last home, back in Columbia City area, in the Hudson area. And so yeah, this is kind of like our last event in this building until we close. Until we actually close out the place. You know, our programs have been as active as ever. We're in our fourth cohort for our fellowship program, which is our leadership development program. I love this program. I always tell people the program I wish I went through when I started out in the sector. And we did something different this time. We gave ourselves about 6 months to work with the host organizations to really help them not only be ready to onboard the fellows that they're going to host, but really create a place for community and other types of training and support for one another. Our operations support program, which is what we call our fiscal sponsorship program, is up and running as more than ever. We have about actually I lost count. We're about 19 fiscal sponsors right now, and we know there's a long waiting list waiting for us to open back up. Excuse me. We've had it closed for a while, mainly because of capacity, and then the demand for it is really, really high. So keep your eyes and ears open for when we open that back up. Our capacity building program it's just hired 2 more staff members. This is the biggest our team has been staff-wise since the creation of the team about 6 years ago. So we're very excited about that. In addition to those 3 big programs, we also have our initiative called the Social Justice League, which is an initiative that really allowed us to bring together funders and create a pooled fund to provide unrestricted funding for our partners over the next 5, well, we're in the second year. So total 5 years. It's been a huge help for our partners, and we're so thankful for that initiative, and so thankful for so many of you that might be in this call that contributed to it and helping us getting that going. And you know, we're all growing. RBC about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe about 4 years ago, we were about 10 staff. As of right now, actually, I forgot we hired 2 people, but we're about 25 people, which is huge for us. That's, it's super exciting. And our partners are growing too. I would say about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, we had about 100 employees total with all our fiscal sponsorships. As of now, we're about 200. So we've doubled both the RBC and staff and for our organizations over the last couple years. Yeah, I think that covers all the major things in case I'm looking to my colleagues if you got anything. Got the okay, so I'm gonna hand it back to you, Desiree.
Thanks. So I'm wondering if one of y'all could also share just a little bit of context on where we're at, kind of high level with our shared leadership journey so far.
Yeah, I can do that. Hi, again, Roshni. So we started off on the shared leadership journey, maybe for the same reasons y'all are as well, that we know the ED job can be impossible. A lot of our jobs are really unsustainable. We really have shifted to looking at wellness in our staff, and I think the pandemic pushed us to do that more. And we wanted to get out of this idea that there was just like this one leader, that can really take on an org. And all of those things led us to doing shared leadership, which we had done somewhat informally since close to the beginning of our founding. But the actual process to move from that thought to where we are now was 2 to 3 years, with a lot of twists and turns. First, we had to get explicit that we were going to do shared leadership, and that was a whole conversation. Then we tried a board staff committee that didn't quite get momentum. We tried a recruiting firm that didn't quite work. And so we really got momentum going when it became a staff-driven process that was being led by 2 awesome consultants, Kat Smith and Michelle Glissison. I want to give you a shout out, who understood our self-managing structure and what we were trying to do. And we studied models. So our staff committee went out, found a model, and kind of concluded, oh, we could do this 4-person structure potentially. And at the same time, we just asked everybody who was interested, and 4 of us didn't say no. I won't even say we said yes, we didn't say no. So between this official process that was going on with all staff and this organic process of realizing 4 potential people were there, we started talking about our roles, we started mixing them up, trying to look at like parity in our roles, what is the urgent labor, the emotional burnout labor, what things even needed to stay with us at the org-wide level. That was a process. At one point, I felt like we were playing like dominoes or mahjong and turning these roles around. But in the end, it actually for us was a full organizational shift. That's often what people can't tell. About 10 people went into new roles when we took on these roles of ours that were hybrid. Like most of us were mixing co-ED roles with other roles we were in. You all were shifting out of leading programs. So even though you sit on program teams, other folks took on leading those programs because we didn't want someone to have both those roles and that much decision-making together. And now we're about 1.5 years into our structure. And the thing is from week 1, we got questions about what we learned, and we're like, give us at least a year, and we'll tell you what we've learned from our structure. So here we are to do that. I think that's a good, did I forget anything? All right.
Thank you so much, Roshni. So I think it's about time to start digging into the main, bulk of our Q&A. And I want to just say thank you to all the folks who submitted questions when they registered for today's event. We're going to start with some of the most common questions that our co-EDs get, and then we'll kind of dig into some follow-up questions. If you want to add questions in the chat, we encourage you to add them there. Today, we'll probably focus more on any follow-up or clarifying questions. And any new questions, we'll try our best to get to at hopefully some future thought leadership events. So let's kind of start digging in. Pull up our questions. All right. So our first question is kind of related to the fact that over and over again, we hear folks ask questions about how decisions are made and how power is shared on our team. So could y'all tell us a little bit about how you make decisions?
I can step into that. Part of the reason I like to talk about how it was a big shift for our org is that we built how we make decisions on how RVC's decision-making structure works, which is that we have a distributed decision-making structure as part of being a self-managing org. And if you're the lead of something, it's why we talk about this. If you're the lead of something, you, like we were trying to get Jojo to tell you what he was the lead of, but you kind of hold the decision. You decide how it's going to be made. You get a lot of feedback. Sometimes you're the solo decision maker. Sometimes you're like, it needs to be a group decision, but that really matters. So for us, getting our roles clear on what we were leading on, and also on what we were on the team on for other staff, you know, where we weren't the lead, but we were going to be in it with folks, especially as people who give feedback, was really important. So I like to say that, and I like to say that with alongside the thing about it being an organizational transition, because we really lead into how we make decisions to do this. And it's going to be different for y'all. I talk to a lot of people about this. And for some folks, your decision-making structure is really set. Some people are just trying to work out how 2 people will split this role. But for us, it really grew out of how RVC makes decisions at all. So that's why the role mapping became so important. Yeah. And I think it works. Like we put in a lot of front. We usually know who's holding something, but we often are making, yeah, we usually do. And then we kind of bring it to each other a lot and to the staff. Oh, I did good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The only thing I would add, you know, is about how much time we had to put into that,
Mhm.
right? Like because so many of us and so many of our staff who also are all decision makers for something, we all were like in positions before that didn't give us that empowerment to make decisions. So I just want to emphasize that we really got to invest time on that, because it's a new muscle that for almost everyone practice at an organization level.
Thank you. All right, so for our next question, often folks tend to focus on the structure of shared executive leadership, but I know y'all talk often about the importance of your team culture. So could you talk about your team culture, how you built it, maybe some practices you put into place, and what it looks like?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, how y'all doing? Okay, we're about to get into it now. I think the important part of this question, and I think why I wanted to jump in to talk about it, is I was actually the last co-ED to sign on. I wasn't 100% in. A lot of it is I've had experience with shared leadership in other organizations, to be exact, and they just didn't happen. It didn't happen the way that we had envisioned, and we didn't allow for it to grow into something that is what we see here. I think to go back to what Roshi was saying about the culture, RVC has a very specific culture, which may not work for your organizations, but it has a very specific culture. One is that we have a lot of love and trust in the work that we do across the board. And I think with that, that kind of is the underlying foundation of like why we're working on this, why it's still an experimental form, but it still feels good while we're doing it. So there's let's see, how long did it take for me to actually agree? Probably, I mean, it was literally pushing deadlines for me. And I was like, hold on, we're not set yet. We're not there yet. And I think that some of what the learnings that I had was like, we needed something that was going to build a lot of team culture. I wanted to make sure that we were going to be in trust all the way with one another. And truth be told, we we started out in terms of our executive search, not on good standing. So there was a lot of factors that kind of played into why we needed to create something, why we needed a long runway, and why it was important for me if I was to sign on, and for them to actually sign on to becoming co-EDs. We already knew that we were going to be jumping into something that we'd have to work and mold and create, and also have a lot of feedback and input from staff to see if we were going in the right direction, or we were moving in the fashion that RBC wants us to move. And not just RBC, but also our partners, right? I think a lot of the way we move is going to be informed by our partners and our community. So long story short, I think the beauty of what we have is we had the opportunity to kind of build not just the job aspect of it, but really build upon each other's friendship and trust in the work that we do, which is crucial for when we're serving communities, right? And even beyond that, and I know with the pandemic and with all the social uprisings that has been happening, a lot of it had to be based on how we trusted each other. With one ED, you cannot go deep, right? With two EDs, you're going to try to go deep, but you're still on the going wide with the work that you're doing. And what we're even finding with 4 is that we are going deeper, but not as deep as we want to. We're still not fully involved in our full roles yet, which is something that I think we're working on. But I have the utmost trust and respect for these 4 and the rest of staff, because I know that they have grace for any of the failures or any of the missteps that I may have. And I think that is the culture that is crucial to build first before you jump into a shared leadership role. And then on top of that, life happens. And the important piece of that is that I know that whatever roles and responsibilities that I have, the stuff that they don't like, that they will actually pick up, because I know I can trust that I can step away for a little bit and they got me. And that's crucial. That's crucial for anything to be successful. So
I would definitely echo that. I think to both my colleagues' point, we were very intentional about how we stepped into this. And so there were several meetings and several sessions at the onset of even brainstorming of, okay, what do we want this to look like? How do we want to move to get to know each other, so that when those times where correction or support need to be made, we know it's coming from a place of love. We feel like, we're extensions of each other's families. And so we'll put the best that's not only for the organization, but for each other first and foremost. And that makes, coming to work easy. It's why I joined RBC. It's why I continue to stay here. And we're hoping that comes through, from the engagement today, and hope you all stick around for this journey with us.
Practically speaking, we also did, like you were saying, some team building times, because I got into a room with you all and felt a spark. I like that spark, and I think I still feel it. I would face things with you. But then we also had April Nishimura, who used to work at RBC, take us through some team building times, and we built a charter about what we center. We talked about what we wanted to prioritize. We talked about what we wanted the first year to look like. We came up with some real meeting practices about like frequency and how we check in on things. Like certain meetings where we make sure to just have conversation about anything we're in, we don't think each other knows about. Stuff like that, that really helped form our team. But even today, when I came to this, I was like, am I nervous? I'm not. I'm doing it with you all. And I think that feeling was there from the beginning, and we really intentionally built on that.
Yeah. And I would just add that I think that team building time was very crucial, because even though we were all at RBC in a different position before taking on this position, we knew each other, but we didn't really know each other. Meaning like our work didn't overlap as much, some of us more than others. Like, for example, I was a CAP lead before. I barely got to interact with Chris, and not because I didn't want to, but it's just our work didn't cross paths, for example. Whereas I got to interact with Roshni because we were doing the same role. And so that team building time, even when you hire internally, was really important because you don't get to always work that closely with each other in your previous positions. And that team building time was pretty key to building our team culture.
Thank you. So I think our next question relates to something that Jojo said a minute ago about kind of still wanting to go deeper. Sorry. Yeah, so Jojo talks about like still wanting to be able to go deeper as co-EDs. And I know that RVC has often said that the single ED job is just impossible. So do y'all think that doing shared leadership has made this a more sustainable job kind of in reality and in practice?
We're laughing because the other day we were at this and Jojo, I think, said 100% and I said no, I think. So that was. Do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay, you know, it's kind of, Jojo did touch about this earlier about like going deeper thing. And I think in particular for RVC, and this is, I don't know if we all agree, but my opinion is that, you know, we started with 50% co-ED and 50% our programmatic work. So if you really think about putting us for 50% together, it's really only 2 people. So as Jojo said, the 2 people still doesn't allow you to take what you inherited from the organization, you know, can build on that infrastructure and go deeper, but also build on it and do other things that the organization needs as you grow. So I think it is, you know, we're in this place where we're trying to like think about to change those percentages, right? And I think at the end of the day, no matter how many people you have, the needs of the community and the needs of the organization are always going to be so much. You know, sometimes I say to my team, it's like, man, we just can't get a break because it's like challenge after challenge. And that's expected with the role, but sometimes it just, you know, those challenges really take a lot of your time and energy. So I think there is possibility for sustainability. And I think it's about getting really clear on what each of our roles need to be and also staffing up around us to really make sure we're at the right side. So that's why when we were the other day, I really said no, because the 4 of us, there's 4 of us. And again, because we have the 50-50 split, all of us are over capacity right now. At that, I think we're all on the same page about,
I
right?
really think like we took about 3 roles, because we did have sort of an informal shared leadership structure. We took like 3 roles and made them 4, like if we think about our existing roles too. So it's good to be honest about how much capacity you're really adding.
Yeah. And I don't think we knew that when we took on the roles. Like some of us were like, we got training, we were blessed to have the previous leadership with us to do the onboarding. But when we fully went in it, then we're like, oh, this is what exactly needs to be done. And that's a lot more than I think anyone anticipated.
One of my roles is community partnership. And to be honest with you, I have not been able to touch upon that in the last year. Again, going on the deeper, wider, there's just aspects of the job that just doesn't allow me to do that. I think for all of us, we all have that. There's something on our list that we just can't get to. I think it's really important to say that because it's all of us trying to figure out how to calibrate so we can get to it. And to be honest with you, we're still learning. Ananda has shared with us an amazing amount of experience and knowledge. And I would say like at least once a meeting, once a month, we're like, how did Ananda do this all by themselves? Ananda Valenzuela was the managing director, interim executive director before we all took on.
And potentially listening to this right now.
And potentially, yeah, I think we were just amazed by how much Ananda was able to take on all of these roles. So for us, we're still learning and unpacking all of those things and still trying to figure out how do we get to those parts of our jobs that we want to make sure we tend to.
Yeah, because depth is a real, it's time, like. There's a lot of breath being taken up, and as we like try to do our roles, especially at a bigger size, I think they take more depth. And I do also think that it is sustainable in the sense of like the emotional burden, the responsibilities, working through complex issues, we have each other a lot. We've all been able to take PTO or sabbatical for real. Knowing other people can cover, I think. And this has been true of a lot of folks in our community, have had really unexpected and big things happen in our lives and our family lives, and have really been able to shift stuff around. So even if I can't get to certain things in my job, I like emotionally and energy wise feel like, well, I could sustain this for a while often, so you know. And that part of it makes me feel like I never wanted to do this job before. It was a shared leadership job, ever.
And that's a shout out to Fabiola and the Gen Ops team, because I think that's beyond just us having the culture
Yep.
of making sure that we had it, but really RBC is cognizant of making sure that that is something that we have within our culture. And so it allows us to do that, right? Again, some of the experiments, we're looking at 50-50 breakdown, we're changing that, right? And some of us are gonna have to move to 100% because it's just not even sustainable to be able to have us sitting on and working on other programs. And it's probably not fair to the other programs because we're not going to be giving the deepness of the work to those programs. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we're still learning as we kind of experiment with the numbers that we have now.
No, I think you guys nailed it on the head. I think for me, just, you know, this structure tends to our humanity. And I know as someone who went through a lot over this last year, that Roshan was saying, you know, I don't know if I would have kept my sanity, have been in some other space. And so I'm grateful for, you know, my team colleagues here and then also RBC as a whole.
Thanks, y'all. Those are really like rich discussion. I appreciate that. We're gonna kind of shift gears a tiny bit. I know we were focusing first on some of the most commonly asked questions. Now we're gonna get into some of the questions that folks asked when they registered. One thing folks asked about a lot is the role the board plays in shared leadership. So what has our experience looked like, and what advice would you give folks who are kind of navigating the shared leadership waters specific to their board?
I'm the board liaison for our team. Another one of the roles. And I get this question a lot when talking to folks. So our board did a really good job of sort of moving and following the process of the staff, and also went through their own process of doing consent principle with CAD on the model that we brought up. So in that way, our board was like very supportive. And I think now they have the same question of like, how do we best energize ourselves to support this self-managing, to support the shared leadership, but also the way that RBC has a self-managing org where the staff make a lot of decisions. And I think a lot of folks are trying to figure out like what the role of the board is, not just in shared leadership, but in like having a less like dominant structure board. So for our board, they were like, but how do we support the co-EDs and how do we evaluate them? So they're working on building that, like just a performance evaluation. I think that there were certain committees that work, like the finance committee more works with UNBER, but I think the fear is like, how do we make sure that we can, if we're not just working with one person, how do we make sure we can like support them, hold them accountable, blah, blah, blah. How do we know how things are going with the four of you? But I think that question is a question boards ask anyway. Like, I'm like, how are you supporting your single ED currently in that? How are you getting accountability for that single ED? A lot of EDs don't have that from the board, depending on what you, like if you're a working board, if you're a governance board, blah, blah, blah. So I think that the question isn't different, you know? It's just, you're trying to think of, you have to understand how we work together. And so we were able to have me be the liaison, but I do think there's some stuff around the performance that's really important and making sure folks know who their leads are for the types of work you're building these. And there's this question of like, okay, but there's this new question of like, okay, if we're not needed for this top-down way quite the same way, because we're getting a lot of support from each other. One thing is also each of us supervise each other. We have a supervisory structure, and we're the only EDs I know that have like weekly supervisory meetings, like where you're getting a lot of ability to also get your soundboard time. So I think the question then becomes like, what can the board do to understand the org to make sure that we're staying values aligned and like supporting our community? So, but I do hear a lot of fears around that piece about like, if it's more than one person, how do we work together? But I think you just examine how you're trying to work with one person and then think what needs to get shared and who can hold the majority of it. And we're very much in the middle of this, very much in the middle of asking about like, what's the board 2.0 look like?
Thanks, Roshni. So for our next question, and I kind of have a feeling I know which of you might answer this one. A lot of people asked, what have donors and funders thought about our shared leadership transition?
I'll take that.
Yes.
It's been extremely supportive. I mean, from trying to gain an understanding of what we're doing to just asking the question, how can we engage with you or continue to engage with you? We've had a lot of folks who might have started out supporting RVC come back and find their niche again with us, which has been great. I think really trying to gain an understanding of what this is going to look like and what this next iteration of the organization and how our work is going to change. And then who should they talk to? That's one of the biggest questions, like, where do I go with this? You know, I think one of the takeaways from this process thus far is that, you know, obviously it's like, you know, kind of the rising tides lifts all boats, right? It's better to have multiple hands able to support one another than just some bare hands alone, right? And so it's great to be able to actually have think partners with my colleagues and say, okay, what does this look like? You know, RVC has a very unique culture. And though we do some things that are traditional in fundraising scope, we try to make sure that we are always thinking of our partners in our communities first and foremost, even when we're making funding decisions or accepting resources from outside entities. And so it's great to be able to have my colleagues to bounce these ideas off of and say, you know, is this how we really want to show up in this space? Are these really partnerships and engagements that are going to benefit the whole and not just RVC as itself? And so, you know, I think that we're on a great trajectory. You know, we're getting a lot of support, but we always need more. And yeah.
I think there's a lot of hunger for this also to understand models, because a bunch of funders also see that like having a sustainable, robust enough nonprofit sector that can do what we're saying we want to do or undo what we're trying to do and then be done is also a big push by funders as well. I mean, a big push by a lot of our partners, right? And so I think there is I hear a lot of hunger for shared leadership out in the world, in the organizations, folks here. And I think that is also reflected with a bunch of partners. And then it's like inviting in the folks that don't quite haven't yet experienced that model.
Great. So another thing a lot of people asked about were, you know, communication and strategic team practices to be on the same page. Could y'all speak to that a little bit as well? Sure.
I think this goes back to what we were saying earlier about really spending that time beforehand to not just build the culture and do team building, but from there we named, you know, how do we want our meetings to look like? How often do we want to meet? And what does that look like in terms of, you know, obviously there's room for a lot of emerging issues, because anyone who's in ED on this call know there's a lot of emerging issues, but there were certain things that we wanted to make sure that we always had in place, right? Like our supervision structure and our meetings giving us time to talk about what are our high priorities, or having time to think about or talk about what are some of the conversations that we're having with staff, because in a normal single ED structure, you would know everything, but since there's 4 of us, each of us holds something, and in order to really make really good decisions, we want to make sure we have time for that. And I would also say the evolving process, right? We're only a year and a half. There are not a lot of models out there that have 4 people, usually it's 2 to 3. And even if there was, I think every organization is different, and you have to think about what are the needs of your organization, how you meet those needs. And so as times go on, we realize we have different needs, or we realize we have needs that we didn't realize we need to have met. What I mean by that is, for example, just a few months ago, we decided 1 hour a week does not work. So we have a day-long meeting every month called the Co-ED Day. And basically that allows us to have more time to dig deeper on something that is on our plate, something that needs more strategy and visionary thinking, or just having more spaciousness to talk about something. So those are like some of the bigger practices that are coming up, and I think more will come up as time goes on. And then there's smaller practices that we just realize, pretty quickly we realize, yeah, we can all take PTO, but 2 of us can't take PTO. No more than 2 should take PTO at the same time, right? Because it was too much for 1 person to cover all 3 of us, right? So there's both those big and small things that we named in the beginning, and also continuing to name as things go on, because, even if we had all the practices in the beginning, our surrounding environment is always changing, and the needs of our organization are always changing.
Co-ED Day has been a dream too, I think. So it allows our other meetings to just be more feedback, what we need to get done versus the deeper thinking stuff or bigger issues we're trying to tackle. We also talked a lot about what I consider a lot of that invisible labor and coordinating labor, about switching around facilitation in our meetings, switching around note taking, having a certain kind of check-in where we, like I said, we have a check-in about conversations we're in. And since we're on programs, I think we have a pulse, like we have different views of it. And if that changes, then we'll have to see like where are we hooked into and where aren't we, to make sure we are. So I think that there's been a lot of that everyday labor too, that we were intentional about, that helps us be smooth.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I think we named in our charter, but I think it's really important for us to be intentional now, is to make sure with all of that we center joy. We give time for check-ins, we give time to just, have fun with it. I think you probably missed it in the beginning, but we were kind of really energetic before. I think because we're talking about, now we're talking a bit calmer, but we can get really just quickly, like we were in tears laughing. And I think there's just that piece of making sure we have time for that. We're doing, we have a group chat to check in on each other, both on personal and work level pieces that also really help us have really good communication with each other. And I think all of those things help us. Another thing that I told them I have to talk about today is, like, when you have these practices and build a team culture, that's how you're able to have a team to like talk, have multiple conversations, to color coordinate our clothes for events like this and pictures and things like that. So anyways, I just wanted to add, like, it's really important for us to make sure, I know we're talking about all the tactical pieces, but even in all of that, we make sure to have room for joy and jokes and just checking in on each other as individuals.
This may be the quietest we've ever been, trying to make sure that we are understood.
Thank you. Well, we have about 4 minutes, and we're going to try to get through 2 more questions, one that was submitted in the chat and then one to wrap up. So the question that was submitted in the chat today is, how did you communicate the changes of staff roles and models, and how did you get buy-in for the changes?
Assuming that means for the community and our partners, maybe?
Or staff?
I think it's about how did we communicate the changes to staff? And then maybe you could speak to like other stakeholders as well.
I think, so Roshni had said it earlier, I think it was staff driven, that where we found success for looking at this type of model. And not just that it was staff driven in the beginning, but it's actually, we still really rely on staff leading us and where they would lead us. I was thinking about it on my drive here. That this wouldn't have probably been as possible if it wasn't for staff who have always checked in on us as individuals, right? And how are you doing? How was the co-ed? Co-edship? How is the team doing? Understanding like that the process is going to be hard, and even seeing that they're impacted by how we kind of decide to move. And I think that's what's been really helpful for us. And in terms of continuing like the experiments and the evolutions of the type of work we're doing. I also see it as an opportunity for staff to see a plan for themselves if they were to looking at kind of joining or coming into place for this position. We're the four of us, as much as we love working together, we're not going to be doing this the whole time. And I think these opportunities to kind of see how we are developing is also opportunities for staff to see, oh, that's something I could fit into or I'm interested in. And so there's always that give and take. Now to talk about the communication piece, because sometimes the four of us, we get so caught up in like, oh shit, we gotta do this and that, and we gotta respond here, and we gotta respond there. Sometimes we forget, and staff have been the ones who are telling us, all right, can you give us an update on how the four of you are doing? So now that's another piece that we want to make sure we implement every month. And Umber's been very good about, we need to communicate to staff.
Umber's often really good about it.
So I don't know if there's anything else.
I think we also communicated a lot about, where you gonna go? About the role mapping we did in the beginning, and we each talked about our asks for accountability or feedback, or our asks for what would support us in our leadership. So we didn't have to communicate internally so much our model, that was more external, which there was a blog and a nice lily pad drawing of our structure. Thanks again, Ananda and Hannah. And yeah, so we did a lot of trying to set up this thing as we're in a supportive environment, and what do we need to be supported in our jobs? So I think we communicated a lot about that and our goals in the beginning.
I just want to add or emphasize that staff were involved every single part of the process. So when we named what kind of structure we wanted, it was a staff retreat. When we had a transition committee, staff were on it. Even before we all opted in, Jojo and Chris were on it with other staff. When we had a proposal on the table, it was another staff meeting, a retreat. And going back to what Roshni described earlier about the decision-making model, we had used the consent principle. So every single staff member had to agree with the four of us agreeing to the position and the roles we were taking on. And if they were like, had any questions, there was one-on-ones in order to like make sure everyone was fully on board. So staff were very, very involved from A to Z, in great detail.
And that might not be your situation, in which case I would just stress the over communicating and the thinking behind why you split things the way you did, and which piece you can feel clear on and don't. So I've talked to folks that are a small team doing this and then communicating it out.
All right, thank you. We're gonna do one more quick question because there are a few items we need to get to at the end. So in like 2 sentences, what is one piece of advice you'd give folks who are already in or considering moving to shared leadership?
So start.
Yeah.
Set your foundation. You're building a structure. You take time, you're very intentional. 2 sentences. But just make sure that you set your foundation and be very intentional about how you build from that point.
Thank you so much. I say really take time to understand what are the needs of your organization and what capacity, like what's the right sizing of it, so you can understand what kind of structure could be really helpful around that. And I would say just have fun with it at the same time and make sure that you have fun with it with the team that you decide to do it with.
I had something similar, so.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I had another thought. I do think, don't launch another new thing. If your shared leadership is a big thing, you know, let that be your project. And also there is a real sense that our roles have a lot of parity in them. There are things they do, as Jojo has mentioned, I don't wanna do, but I think there are things I'm handling that you're like, thank God that's Roshi. And we really feel that. We're not like, oh, I have all this and you get all the fun stuff, you know? And so and we were intentional. So I think that's great. And then, yeah, face it with your team. I think a commitment on the team to each other and to the model, even if it changes, like there's a real commitment that we have so that we can experiment. And it's not one of us dragging the other one into it. So that's for mine.
I actually don't have anything to add. The three of them said it all.
Can I say something else?
That's nice. You're like, I'll take Jojo's.
Hold on, Umbra has something that I want to say.
I was just gonna say, building off of what was said before, I think it's so important to build time for the team building with your co-leadership. Like, it's really easy to get, you know, like Jojo was saying earlier, like, oh, we have to respond to something, you have to do this, we have to do that. Team building has to be priority because that's what really builds the fluidity of being able for the shared leadership to work.
That's my time.
Do it, you do real quick.
Okay, you're going deeper in a shared model, so don't be surprised if you're like, ooh, no one's been in this room. There's a lot of work to do in this corner that looks small. It will get bigger.
Yeah.
So,
And Roshi will email you.
I do know.
take us home, Desiree.
All right. That is it. Thank you so much for all your answers in the rich conversation. Before we wrap up, I know we want to express some gratitude. First off, gratitude to all the folks who have been so essential to this shared leadership journey. You know, of course, a big thanks to our co-EDs for getting into the weeds today. We really appreciate you. We also want to give a shout out to all of the RBC staff. As our co-EDs have mentioned, this whole process would not be possible without them. We also want to give a shout out to the folks who are already doing the co-directorship life. Extra applause to Communities Rise for launching their co-directorship this week. We also want to share gratitude to those who made today's event possible. Special shout out to Ray, Mandy, Amanda, Penny, Wynn, and all the other staff and all the other staff who helped make today possible. We also want to thank Progress Alliance for hosting us on their Zoom today. And then last, but certainly not least, thank you to everyone for coming today. It's so good to see other organizations and folks exploring distributing power and exploring these liberatory structures. So a few final notes. I know we're just about at time. We wanted to let folks know that if you're local and you'd like to celebrate with us, we'll be at happy hour at Optimism Brewing today from 4 to 6 p.m. So please feel free to join us. We'll also be sending a follow-up email, which will have the recording and some of the remaining questions that we want to get to in future blog posts or other thought leadership events. And then finally, we're going to be dropping a link to a survey. So please fill that out if you have a moment. Your feedback is essential to future events like these. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Go, Chris. Bye.
Goodbye. I love you all.